Welcome everybody to Eat Chat Parent, the March edition on pain influencing our thoughts and behaviors. We'll just wait a few minutes to make sure everyone who's registered can enter into this really important discussion. So make sure you have something to write on and write with and something to drink so you can settle in and focus on this really important conversation. We'll be right there. Hi again, and welcome to March Eat Chat Parent. We're just going to hang on for another minute or so. We just went live on Facebook, so I want to welcome everyone in who's tuning in on Facebook Live, and just hang in there. We'll be starting any minute. Thanks for tuning in. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the March Eat Chat Parent, presented in conjunction with Howard Head Sports Medicine on pain influencing our thoughts and our behaviors. As parents, our own language and coping strategies for dealing with pain create a foundation for our children's relationship with pain. This panel presentation will improve your understanding of pain and provide strategies to help parents and children understand, manage, and express pain. And I want to encourage you that if you have a fifth grader or above in the house, that you grab them right now to sit down with you to join this really important conversation so that you can create shared language around this topic. Before we begin, in order to engage the closed captioning in Spanish, you can go down to Account Settings and click the Meeting tab, and you can enable closed captioning there. And I want to introduce our extraordinary panel this evening. Our experts from Howard Head Sports Medicine. Harlan Austin, PhD. He also has many other letters behind his name that he'll tell you all about in a minute. Dr. Austin is a performance optimization psychologist with Howard Head Performance. He is certified in sports psychology as well as addiction counseling. He has led pain management clinics with a twist from the psychological perspective. We have Brittney Huntimer, and she is a doctor of physical therapy at Howard Head Sports Medicine. She has a therapeutic pain specialist certification and specializes in the treatment of spine, upper and lower extremity injuries, as well as concussion and return to sport treatment and management. Kristin Thomas is a doctor of physical therapy at Howard Head Sports Medicine and is a pediatric certified specialist. She specializes in pediatrics and oncology and is dedicated to providing child and family-centered care with the goal of helping kids and families return to all the activities that they love. I want to thank our sponsors, and there's a long list here of extraordinary contributors to make Eat Chat Parent happen, and they are Eagle Valley Behavioral Health, Vail Health, Alpine Bank, Vail Resorts Epic Promise, Slifer Smith and Frampton Foundation, the towns of Avon, Eagle, Gypsum and Vail, the Eagle River Foundation, Vail Valley Cares, SAMHSA, Wells Fargo, Colorado Office of Behavioral Health, SAMHSA, and Eagle County Government. And we also want to thank Vintage Magnolia, who has generously donated a self-care package to one winner at the end of this evening. And so before we begin, I just want to take a moment to make sure that you know that we believe your questions are really important. And it usually goes that if you have a question, chances are there's many other participants on this call that have the same question. So please, we want to keep the Q&A alive. So if something pops up, just write it into that Q&A forum. And at the end of this conversation, we will answer all of those questions. Welcome, Harlan, Brittney, and Kristin. Thank you so much for engaging us in this important discussion this evening.
All right, everybody, my name is Brittney. I'm just sharing my screen here for you guys. I'm a physical therapist for Howard Head Sports Medicine in Edwards, and I just want to thank all of you so much for letting us join you this evening. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys tonight a little bit more about pain. So some of the topics that we wanted to make sure we went over this evening are, one, we just want to generate awareness that pain is something that it's a normal experience that all of us are going to have, but we have a lot of people becoming very negatively impacted by pain. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We want to understand that pain is a complex process and it has a lot of layers to it. And it's not necessarily just related to a specific injury or a tissue. We're going to talk about the different factors that go into a pain experience. And then we're going to talk about the difference between types of coping strategies for pain. And our goal at the end of this is hoping that by after listening to all of this, that you guys will have a really good knowledge about pain, and you'll kind of be able to develop your own maybe kind of emergency plan checklist of things that you can do to kind of help calm your system down in the event that you experience pain. So when I said that we have quite a few people that are negatively impacted by pain, one way that we can look at this is we can look at some statistics. And we can look at things like reasons why people might be missing time from work. And so if we look at these statistics, we have 1 in 2 adult Americans that feel like they're in it, that are negatively impacted by pain enough that they're missing time from work. That's quite a few people. So if we're looking around in a room or you're sitting next to your neighbor, that's 1 in 2 of us. That's a lot of people. We also know that if people aren't participating in work or feel they can't go to work, they're probably not participating in other really important things in their lives as well. So maybe that's cooking dinner for their family. Maybe that's going to a really cool social event for kids. Maybe that's getting through school and being able to focus on school or being able to participate or go to that sporting event. If we want to look at it from a money perspective, if I tell you all that tonight I'm giving you $213 billion, I think most everybody would jump off their seats right now, right? Like that's a really big amount of money. All of us would be pretty stoked about that. So if we see here, we're spending a lot of money on pain, and yet we continue to see it on the rise. If we look after this year, after living through a pandemic where life has been very different for all of us, we've had to learn how to navigate different territories, dealt with some kind of very concerning things, things that have been worrisome, heard a lot of really negative things. I think we're only going to see that people are experiencing more pain. And we're going to explore some of those reasons. So I have a true or false question for you guys. Pain only occurs when you are injured. So I just want you all to think about that for a few minutes. And how about, have any of you in this room ever had a bruise? My hope is that all of you are raising your hands right now saying, yeah. And how many times have you guys maybe looked down and saw you had a big bruise on your leg and you remember thinking to yourself, I have no idea where that came from. I don't even remember it happening. I didn't experience any pain. I would have never known that that bruise was there until I looked down at my leg and saw it. And so here we have an example of, we have a true physical injury, right? We have broken blood vessels in our leg that, depending on at what point in time you actually looked at it, is black and blue, or maybe it's yellow and green by now, but we didn't even remember having any pain or feeling any pain. And so what do we think about the alternative? Can you think of a time where maybe you experienced some pain, but you didn't actually have a physical injury? How many of you in this room have ever experienced pain? My hope is that everybody's raising their hand, and that is really good news. Really important to remember that we cannot experience pain without a brain. So that means everybody in this room 100% has a brain. That's a really important concept to remember when we think about pain, is that pain's generated and our brain is really, really involved in a pain experience. Information is sent to our brain, and our brain is kind of our like regulatory center, or say our control center. And we get that information into our brain by our nerves, right? So we have 45 miles of nerves that spread basically from head to toe all over our body. That's a lot of miles of nerves. It's the longest thing in our body. It's longer than any bone. It's longer than any muscle. And we have all of these nerves that help communicate that information up into our spinal cord, and then it sends that information to our brain, and our brain gets to be that control center. It gets to be that deciding factor. It gets to say, well, what do I want to do with this information? Is this information important? Do I even care about it, or do I just move on and ignore it? Is this dangerous? Do I need to do something about it? Or what it might say is, this information is important, but I'm going to kind of store it on my hard drive for a later time. This next video is going to show us how pain is really involved, or our brain is really involved in a pain experience.
That's how you're filming this, yeah? I'm going to stroke the fake hand and your real hand at the same time. I want you to tell me when the fake hand starts to feel like your real hand, yeah?
Oh, a second.
You get it.
What?
So let me know when the fake hand starts to feel like your real hand, yeah?
Oh, okay. No way. To be fair,
Anything good?
mate, legit feels like that's my hand right now.
Does it really, yeah? Right, Woody.
That is so strange. Mate, do you know?
Stay still. You trust me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my god! Wait!
So that video is an example of how our brain can be tricked into thinking that it might be seeing something that it's not, or feeling something that it's not. If you guys are all bored later, you guys can try that at home. It's a pretty fun thing. So I like to think about pain in our nervous system very much like our mood, right? We'd all love to say, man, we are just in this great mood all the time and everything's good. But we know our mood goes up and down on a given day based on many factors, both internally, what's going on inside of us, as well as maybe externally, what's going on around us. Our nervous system is very much the same. It's going to change based on a lot of different factors. And in the next few slides, we're going to talk about what some of those factors might be. So in this middle circle here, we have our central nervous system, or what we called all those nerves, right, that give information to our brain. That's the middle object here. And then all of these things surrounding that area are things that can affect what we might feel. Things that can affect that. One is knowledge. So we're giving you some knowledge about how pain works tonight. So that's one way that we can work on our pain. Beliefs, whether I think something might be really good for me and is going to be really helpful for me, versus if I think that something's really bad or I don't think it's going to be helpful, that's going to affect how we feel. The next three things, we're going to kind of give some examples in the next few slides about how environment, past experience, and others' reactions can affect our pain experience. So if we think about when we might experience pain, so say it came from an injury, maybe not, say we're just having a pain experience, it can go one of two ways. So one way is we start to feel some pain, and we come down here and say, I've had something like this happen before. I got better. Life was pretty good. I've got a really good support system around me. People who are encouraging me. I feel really good about it. I confront it. And lo and behold, eventually I recover and I feel better. So that's one nice way that things can happen. But we also know other pain can travel in a different way. So the other way that it can go is we may experience some pain. And say we experience that pain and all of a sudden we start thinking back to, oh my goodness, something like this happened before. Maybe I didn't have the best experience with it in the past. Maybe I have some friends or family around that are telling me all these crazy, terrible stories about somebody else who had a similar experience and they never got better. So I still start getting really worried about the situation. The more worried I get about the situation, the more I think, holy cow, there must be really something going on here. I'm going to avoid using that area. We know the more that we do that, the more negative thoughts we have, and lo and behold, more pain we start to experience. The more pain we experience, the more maybe negative thoughts we have about it, the more we maybe stop using it, and lo and behold, we experience more pain. So we kind of end up in this pain roundabout, if you will, right? And we have no exit. And so why might that happen? So these next couple slides, we're going to talk about, again, how some of these things might cause us to go one direction versus the other direction. So our first one we're going to talk about is environment. So we're going to say this guy here is you. You are on your final regular season game. You are at the 3-point line with 2 seconds left on the clock, and you're trailing your opponent by 2 points. Just as you go to take that shot, this guy, your opponent here, undercuts you. Your legs go up in the air and you fall flat on your back. What happens? Well, we're going to say scenario one happens, right? That shot goes in. So the shot goes in, you feel totally responsible. You just won the game. You're going to go on. You get to play more games. It's your senior year. You were hoping maybe you'd get scouted, maybe get to play in college. You have a few more games to play. People are going to see you. Everybody in this room just saw how you just made that last shot. So you feel really awesome. Do you think about your back? Probably not, right? Or not much. You get up, you go celebrate with your friends, and you move on. But let's say scenario two happens. You take that shot, he undercuts you, you fall on your back, and lo and behold, you don't make that shot. Not only is this the end season game, you're done, it's your senior year, you're concerned, now I'm not going to get to play more, I'm not going to get that chance for those scouts to see me. Everybody in this room just saw me miss that shot. I feel solely responsible for it. Do you think about your back? Absolutely, right? You're probably wailing on the floor, and your coach and your teammates probably have to haul you off. So we can see how the environment changes that experience, right? In both those situations, that gym floor didn't get any harder. He didn't undercut you anymore. The forces stayed the same, but the outcome was very different. The next thing we're going to talk about is how past experience may be involved. So we're going to say it's a bright sunshine day like today in Colorado, and you're out walking around in your backyard without shoes on. You're walking around when suddenly you feel pressure in your foot. You feel some pressure in your foot, and so you look down to investigate the situation. And when you look down to investigate the situation, you see this. You see a nail sticking out of your foot, right? What do? You pick your foot up off the ground, right? You probably start hopping around. You want to keep pressure off your foot. You don't want that nail going any further in your foot than it already is. Likely, it's an emergency situation, right? We need to go to urgent care, maybe the ER. We get there, they have to pull that nail out of the foot. You likely have to get a tetanus shot. Your foot's probably really kind of sore for a few weeks. Maybe you have to use some crutches. You don't get to go to that cool social event. Maybe you don't get to play your favorite sport for a few weeks. Kind of lame, right? We had to do a lot of stuff, and it was pretty concerning. Well, let's say a year later, we're out walking around in our backyard again without shoes on. And we walk around and we're walking, and all of a sudden we feel pressure in our foot again. What do? Immediately we start thinking, oh my goodness, the last time this happened, I looked down and I had a nail sticking out of my foot. I had to go to the ER. I had to get a tetanus shot. It really hurt. I had to miss a lot of cool things. So immediately, what do? We pick our foot off the ground. We think this is a bad situation until we look down to investigate the situation. And when we do, we look down and see this. We see that we've just stepped on a branch. There's no puncture in our foot. Everything's good. What do? If you're smart, my hope is that you go back inside, you get your shoes on, and you go back outside and you finish whatever you were doing in the yard. So again, what we felt was pressure in our foot, right? But based on our past experience, until our brain further investigated the situation, things can feel differently. The next thing we're going to talk about is others' reactions. So parents, you probably remember when your kids were first learning to walk, or kids, if you have a sibling, you probably remember them learning to walk, or if you've ever babysat somebody. Babies are pretty wobbly, right? When they first start to walk, they fall down a lot. And so we're going to say, hey, this baby over here is just learning to walk. He's taking his first few steps. when all of a sudden, boom, right? Baby falls down, falls on its butt. What does baby do? Baby immediately turns around, right? To look for mom or dad. And let's say in scenario 1, baby sees this, right? Mom and dad are like, baby's okay, nothing really bad happened. What does baby do? Baby dusts himself off, right? Gets back up and tries again and keeps going. But let's say baby turns around and sees this scenario, right? What does baby do? Baby starts wailing, right? Because that's pretty scary, right? Mom's upset, something really bad must be happening. So again, how others react to our situation can affect how we feel. When we talk about some of those situations, we can see how in those scenarios where maybe things didn't go as well as we wanted them to, we can see how that might increase stress, right? And what happens to our body when we get stressed? Say we have a big test, right, that we have to study for and we're really nervous about it. Do your muscles get really relaxed, or do your muscles kind of get really tensed up? It gets really tensed up, right? What happens to your heart rate? Does it really calm down and you get really relaxed, or does your heart rate get kind of revved up and start increasing? Your heart rate increases, right? So we know when we have stressful situations, we're going to tense more, our heart rate's going to increase. We know with that stressful situation, if we're experiencing some pain, those things are likely going to increase that pain as well. We also know, hey, if we work on doing some good things that might calm our stress down, right? If our heart rate's really increased, if we start doing some nice, deep, relaxing breaths, our heart rate's going to calm down. If we do some nice, gentle stretches or movements, that's going to help our muscles calm down. Maybe if we make sure we're sleeping really well, we're socializing, we're doing lots of really good things, all of those things are not only going to calm our stress down, but they can also have an effect on our pain. This next slide is going to talk about what can happen the longer we might be experiencing pain. So in scenario 1 over here, this line is kind of our threshold, our pain meter, right? Our alarm system. It's kind of like a house alarm, right? So we set that house alarm up to let us know if a burglar gets in, right? So hopefully that's not happening very often, right? That alarm's not going off very, very much. We're kind of in this cool, green, good place, right? Where life is going well. That alarm's not going off very well. The threshold's pretty low, which means, man, I have a whole lot of room for lots of fun activities, right? For doing my schoolwork, for going to class, for parents hanging out with your kids. We've got a whole lot of room for those things. But say we have a pain, and say we have pain that's been going on for a while, this threshold level can get driven way up. Let me back up a minute, sorry. Can get driven way up. Sorry, I think I clicked out of there. Oops. Technical difficulties, sorry. Can you guys still see my screen?
Brittney, hit present.
Yep, I got it. Yep, thank you. So this threshold might get sent way up here instead of way down low. So if this line gets way up here, suddenly now that house alarm, right, we turn it up to where now we don't want to know if just a burglar comes in. We want to know if a leaf blows by, right? We want to know if a dog runs by, if the wind blows. If that happens, now our alarm is going off constantly, right? And we are pretty busy turning that alarm off all day long. If that happens, we're so busy turning that alarm off that now I don't have as much room for all of those activities that we had before, right? I can't focus as much on school. I maybe can't feel like I can do that sport. I might not feel like enjoying as much time with my family. I might be kind of irritable. So as that threshold goes up, our capacity for doing the things that we love goes down. So how do we cope with pain? There's different type of strategies that we have for pain. So when we say passive coping strategies, we're just talking about things that don't really have to involve our brain, right? Doesn't mean that they're all necessarily bad, but it just means our brain doesn't really have to be involved in it. So if I go do some dry needling, or maybe I get acupuncture, or I go get a massage, put a hot pack on my leg, watch TV, eat food, not all of those require a whole lot of mental stimulation, right? We kind of get to be very kind of passive, lay on the table and have things done to us. And while some of those things might help our system calm down, we've just talked a lot about how involved our brain is in a pain experience. And so if we want to be really effective in calming our pain down, we're going to have to do things that help get our brain involved. So those types of strategies are active coping strategies, just like physical activity means we get active, our brain is more active. So what are those types of things? Things like exercise, right? We know it's good for our overall health. We also know it's very, very important in helping us control pain and helping our brain. So doing our favorite sport, taking a hike, strength training, maybe doing something more on the creative side, laughter, really important, feeling connected and like we have good social support, sleep, very important in helping control pain in our overall health, and a lot of other good things that we talked about that can help control stress. And we're going to have some more slides that are going to talk more and more about how to cope with our stress. These are just a few examples of things that help me to calm my system down when I'm feeling stressed out or I'm feeling pain. I'm now going to turn it over to Harlan, who's going to talk a little bit more about our mental health.
Thanks, Brittney. All right. Screen sharing all right for everybody? Very good. So good evening, folks. My name is Harlan Austin. I am a sports psychologist. For anyone who's not quite sure what that means, I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Colorado. And in addition to that, I have extra credentials at a national board level for sports psychology and for addiction psychology. So in my career, I've kind of fused those specialties together to work with folks who are often trying to return to a high performance state in their life, whether that be professional athletes, recreational athletes, or other types of professionals. So, in my career, I have worked and run some pain management groups in the past. Certainly, if you're interacting with athletes, you're going to run into a lot of chronic pain. But as Brittney mentioned, you don't have to be a professional athlete to experience chronic pain. A lot of the folks in our country are experiencing that. So certainly, it's an important thing to talk about with all folks when we're talking about general health. So let me introduce something that I always introduce to folks when I'm talking about chronic pain and dealing with that, and that's the psychophysiological principle. So essentially, what we're talking about here is that for every physiological change we have in our body, it's going to be accompanied by an additional mental and emotional state change, whether that's conscious or unconscious. So when we have a change in our physical state, we're also going to have a change in our mental and emotional state. And the converse is also true. If there's ever a change in our emotional state and our mental state, we also see a corresponding change in our physiological state of our body. And there is a connection between mind and body that just cannot be unconnected. And it's really important for folks to understand that when we're talking about how do we cope with pain. We can't just think our way out of it. If we have it, it's going to impact our brain. However, we can use some aspects of our thoughts to help ourselves feel better. One of the things that I do with folks who we're introducing in a chronic pain group is introduce to them a concept of the biopsychosocial model to help them understand what, sorry about that. To help them understand the overlapping nature of our biology, our psychology, and also the social environment that we're in. A lot of what Brittney spoke to when she talked about the physiological experience of pain and how it comes out can be played out through each of these lenses. When I'm working with an athlete, I always like to introduce the biological first. The biological first is something that most folks who are very kinesthetic and used to their bodies and aware of their bodies are able to focus on and understand. But you can see the biopsychosocial all overlap. And in the center there, we have our mental health. And our mental health is impacted by each aspect of that. And our mental health can be something that spirals down in a negative way or can be used in a positive way to help influence all of these areas of our lives. So when we're looking at the biological and we're talking about pain, it's quite obvious. We have a physical health issue. We have an injury, right? Somebody has a blown out knee and they have to get their ACL replaced via surgery, or somebody has some sort of other mechanical injury to their body. That's usually pretty concrete and people understand what we're talking about with physical health. We also can see when people are physically healthy and they have no organic issues with their health, how that physiological experience is going to be different in the body than one where there's actual injury. One of the things that goes right with that is our neurochemistry. So our neurochemistry has to do with the little chemicals in our brain that essentially are the messages about what's going on. And those messages severely, in certain circumstances, impact our mental health. We'll talk about that when we look at interventions, but one of the things that people often have heard about, one of the neurochemicals that's very popular is dopamine. And so dopamine, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's one of the neurochemistry things that can be influenced by our physical health, also our psychological health and our social health. People's biology can be influenced by a lot of other aspects of their life too. So drugs can help somebody feel better if you're taking a pain medication, but drugs can also make somebody feel worse. Certain pain medications, when taken over time, make you more sensitive to pain. So there's a lot of ways that people can physically do things to help their mental health or hinder their mental health. The next area that I think is helpful to introduce when we're talking to folks about pain is the psychology. So the psychological area, the easy way to break it down is your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all aspects. Most people are readily thinking that, okay, I understand the cognitive piece, I understand the emotional piece, but behavior is also a part of psychology. It's very influenced by our mind, and it's something that we can work to change either our thoughts or feelings or vice versa. Our self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, that's something that's going to greatly impact our mental health. That's going to be influenced by our attitudes, our beliefs. What are the thoughts that we are thinking? What are the thoughts that we saw growing up in our family environment? And there's where we see an overlap with the social environment there. Certainly our perceptions of the world, is this a hopeful place or a not hopeful place, are aspects of the psychological component that can influence our mental health. Coping skills, we talk about ways to cope with pain, but coping skills to deal with emotional issues are very important. They're learned skills. They're things that are often modeled in our environment, or they're taught in the school environment or through counseling, and they're very influential on what's happening with our mental health. Just as influential is our social and our environment. So who we're hanging out with, what our family system is like, what's happening in our family right now. Have we recently had a loss in our family? Is there grief in the home? Is there a history of trauma in the home? What is the family environment with regard to SES? What do we see as far as the peers somebody's hanging out with? All of these things are modeled in the social environment, including how somebody responds to mental health or how they respond to pain. People who have pain responses that have been modeled in an unhealthy way are likely to follow those behaviors and do the same type of behavior themselves in the future. One of the things that we want to focus on when we're influencing folks who have chronic pain or have a mental health issue is the fact that we can influence any one of these circles and have a positive effect or a negative effect. And so I want to move towards the next slide that was a reminder slide that Brittney put up about the pain roundabout. This is a very good example of how we can see somebody going either in a negative spiral or a positive spiral as a result of the pain experience that they had. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I want to introduce a case example that I've worked with in the past and kind of walk us through step by step how we saw this negative spiral start to occur for this patient. So we're going to start at the top of this circle as we're talking about this case. And this case was an NFL football player that I worked with several years ago who had an injury. And the injury obviously came with an experience of pain. The person had to have surgery. Then this injury took them out of their sport for the season. So the person's off the field, not practicing, not playing, and not doing what they love. So with that, we saw come over to the next right there, negative thoughts. Those negative thoughts all about athletic identity. Athletic identity is someone's idea of who I am. I am an athlete. I am, in this case, an NFL football player. I am a football player. This is what I do. And so when somebody loses that, and the pain physically that was experienced alongside of that was compounded by these negative thoughts of I've lost who I am. I've lost what I do, what I want to do, what I'm best at doing. So with those negative thoughts, you're going to see some depressed mood come thereafter. And so with the depressed mood, this person starts to feel feelings of sadness, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of negativity. And in addition to that, what we often see with depressed mood is somebody start to pull away from their social group. And so this individual I was working with was pulling away from the positive social group in their life, that positive social group being their teammates. And as they pulled away from that positive social group, they became more isolated, and that depressed mood was experienced over a longer period of time. We see a neurochemical change in the brain. And that neurochemical and the change in the brain, back to that neurochemical I talked about before, dopamine. Dopamine is really one of the most influential neurochemicals when we're talking about somebody's mood. It's the one that people talk about as the happy chemical. And if somebody have depressed mood, if they have isolation and they're feeling down over long periods of time, we're going to see less and less of the neurochemical of dopamine in their brain and in their system. Now, as they have less and less of that and the body's not producing it the way it used to, not only do we see that depression piece, but that neurochemical actually does something else too. It's an action potential chemical. So it helps somebody get up and go. So if you want to get moving in your life, dopamine's a part of the process neurochemically in your body that gets you going. So we can imagine now, as this athlete feeling depressed mood over a long period of time, starting to have less and less dopamine, they're not having physical activity. And so decreased physical activity comes with that mood, comes with the chemical change that's happening in the brain. And in addition to that, we see some maladaptive coping in this case, maladaptive coping being unhealthy self-medication through the use of drugs and alcohol, which again help to isolate this person from a positive social group. So decreased physical activity is maintained, sitting on the couch, sitting back, not doing what they're supposed to do. And we see the result of atrophy. So atrophy is muscle shrinkage, less muscle mass there, less flexibility, their body's not moving like it used to. But I would also add that there was social atrophy. As somebody is removed due to this spiral that we're seeing happening with pain from their social support group, they're having less and less positive interactions with folks in their lives. And so as we see less and less of that, of course, that's going to relate to more depressed mood, decreased physical activity because of the atrophy, because of the physical difficulty of doing that, and decreased physical activity because of the social atrophy, because they're not getting out and hanging out with the team, being where they're supposed to be. And of course, that compounds more negative thoughts, more hopelessness, more helplessness, more negative self-talk, which results in more depressed mood. And then we see a higher experience of pain with folks who are having all of these factors happen in their lives. So the pain feels worse. And then when the pain feels worse, you can just see how we spiral down and down and down. And the mental health component of this physical sports injury has really helped spiral it into a very overall negative experience for the individual. So what do we do? Well, in this case, I think the good news to recognize is that for as many places of maladaptive things we have going on, we can insert an intervention to help with the mental health of somebody in a positive way. So with this person in particular, we're looking at the negative thoughts piece. One of the things that I worked to do with this patient was to let's identify what those thoughts are. Let's look at that self-talk. Let's have you journal it. Let's see what you're saying to yourself. What is your mind saying? And then we work with that person to help identify a different way to relating some of those negative thoughts. Think about other positive thoughts that have been there in the past and help put things in perspective and help kind of challenge what's going on with the cognitions when somebody's in one of these negative states. And helping get outside perspective is really helpful in this case. Depressed mood, we can intervene here. So one of the things we do with depressed mood is recognize that isolation is a big part of that. We're social animals, we're social beings. What can we do in this case? Well, part of that was to help get this person connected to positive social networks again. That social piece was huge. When you lose your team, when you have to go and you're not at practice and you feel all alone, you're going to feel more and more of that depressed mood. What does this person love? We look for things that are important in their lives. And by identifying those things, let's get you connected back to that. Let's get you even just watching practice. It's better than being at home and lamenting all day long. Of course, neurochemical change, one of the things we can do to change this is medication. In certain cases, you can have a short use of a psychotropic like any kind of antidepressant that you've heard of that might help jumpstart the brain to get somebody back to the place where that now they're ready to do some of the physical moves or they're ready to do some of the work about what's happening with my thinking so that they can get the momentum going in the right direction. And then, of course, move off that antidepressant after we get that momentum where we want it to be. Decreased physical activity and intervention we used here had to do with going to a specific place to do rehabilitation and training. So going to the facility, going to the team facility, having some accountability so that there were people there, coaches there, physical therapists there that were going to help with this, and not trying to do that. I'm going to do it on my own at my house. And of course, that's going to counter that atrophy and get that physical movement happening again and get somebody moving in the physical right direction as we're trying to get them moving in the emotional right direction and the cognitive right direction. So that mental health piece is very important. And I'm going to kind of pivot from talking about that mental health piece to identify how important the parent's role is in that mental health piece. So when we're talking about the mental health and the overall experience of chronic pain, parents are huge role models, are very important. And I always advocate for do as I do as being a far more effective intervention than the do as I say, not as I do intervention. We want to see folks modeling adaptive thinking, feeling, and behavioral strategies. When parents do these things, it's easier for folks in the family to follow the lead. And there are multiple strategies I'll introduce to you, give you a few different things that you can try out. One of them is just perspective shifting. And so this is helping take the angle that somebody's looking at this problem with and learn how to look at it in a different way. And so instead of focusing on what one can't do, and often what happens when somebody has an injury and they're experiencing pain, it's like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. We want to help take some practice in shifting to focus on what one can do. And, this is the difference between pessimism and optimism, but this is something that parents can help by reframing things and helping shift perspective when this type of topic is coming up in the household. Another way to cognitive reframe is to just pay attention to the language that people are using. So an example I have here is somebody says this pain will never end. And there's another way to talk about that, because sometimes there may be pain that's going to be chronic in nature, but instead of saying this pain will never end, someone might say, I've had bad flare-ups before. I know I can get through this. It's not lying to oneself. So maybe it is a chronic pain issue that's going to be there. But instead of saying it's never going to end, which is this hopeless stance, it's a different perspective. Shift that cognitive reframe to say, yeah, I've had bad flare-ups. I've had bad pain before. I know I can get through this. Another example of that cognitive reframing, my pain messes everything up in my life. And that's an all or nothing statement. There's other ways we can say things. I may have to change some of my goals, but I can still do a lot of things. Again, back to perspective shifting and paying attention to the language that folks are using. Great opportunities for parents and to think about for oneself if we are experiencing pain, how do we talk about it? Or if we hear someone in our family experiencing pain, what are the things they're saying and how can we maybe help reframe some of that? Of course, another piece is really important is physical activity. Move, move, move. That's important. That's a big part of pain. What do people want to do when they're feeling physical pain? They want to not move. However, active pain management strategies have been shown time and time again to help provide better outcomes in the end. If someone in the family is hearing someone say, oh, this hurts, pass me the meds, or oh, this hurts, give me a drink, right? Give me something outside of my body, something external to help me feel better. Then the lesson there is that we can't do this on our own. And the reality is there are a lot of physical things that we can do that can help us feel better. One of them is changing how we do a physical activity. So if somebody wants to go on a big, huge hike and we can't do that, rather than just not doing anything, we can still go for a walk, right? So we can do something, it's just on a different scale. And it's going to be a part of that longer journey to help actively cope with that pain. If somebody can't even go for a walk, but you value being outside, then go to the trailhead, hang out there, move around a little bit, pass out waters, but you're now doing some behaviors that are more congruent with what you care about, rather than sitting back, not doing anything, and then having some other negative things happen. So just making sure that we get into some kind of physical activity is huge at whatever level possible. But this modeling by parents is really important. Sometimes kids might want to be doing something and the parents feeling a lot of pain. And there's ways that you can engage in their physical activity without meeting their level of physical activity, right? Maybe you do a sport and you're the referee. Maybe you're the all-time QB and you can't touch the QB in this sport. But you find a way to be a part just so that you're moving and you're showing that when we experience pain, we can continue to go on. Another really important one is emotional experiencing. So with emotional experiencing, what we're talking about is recognizing that we can experience a multitude of different emotional states. It doesn't have to just be one. I think one of the best examples I can come up with is when you're feeling down or you're feeling depressed, you're feeling sad, you can still have little sprinkles or moments of joy while you're feeling those emotions that may be undesirable for folks. You can watch your favorite comedy movie. You can listen to a favorite stand-up comedian. But those moments where you're going to laugh, where you're going to have a little bit of joy, are going to be breaks in that overall native emotional experience that someone's having. And parents play a really important role in helping model this, that yes, we can be sad and we can also have moments of happiness, laughter, hope while we're feeling sad. Both can be true. It's very much a part of the human experience to be able to feel multiple emotions. And those little breaks, I call them positivity shots. It's just this quick little insert of a neurochemical experience that's positive amongst other ones that aren't so positive. But if we don't get any of those little positivity shots, then the net experience can continue to do that spiral down. And the idea is we want to have things spiral up. And so seeking out emotional experiences that make us feel better, even if it's for a short period of time, are really valuable. It's really good medicine. And one of the last modeling things that I think parents can do when we're talking about mental health, which is overlapping with chronic pain, is setting very realistic goals with regard to how we're going to deal with this. If the goal that someone wants to set up is I'm going to feel zero pain, probably not going to achieve that goal. It's going to be probably unattainable. But if we can have a different type of goal that is I want to live a meaningful life while I have pain, that's much more realistic and much more attainable, which can help build confidence and help people balance going forward the idea that I have this and I can still do things that are important to me. The other piece of this, and we'll probably talk more about this in the question, is messages about no pain, no gain can be dangerous as well. So just denying the fact that pain exists is not something that we want to do. We want to swing the pendulum all the way that way, because that can be dangerous when somebody actually is experiencing pain. And so stopping and listening and really providing an audience with family about this is really important. Now, I'm going to switch this over to Kristin, who's going to talk a lot more about working with kids.
All right. Thanks, Harlan. Thanks, Brittney. As mentioned before, I'm Kristin Thomas, and I'm the pediatric therapist here at Howard Head. I did go to University of Michigan for undergrad, and I was thinking about the basketball game last night when Brittney was talking, and I'm really happy that none of their players got hurt on the last shot of the game, because it did not go in. They probably would have been in a lot of pain. So this is my crazy dog, and we'll get going. So just to review, now that you know that there's an inextricable link between the mental and physical side of pain, I'm going to go into a little bit more about how this specifically relates to kids and how you as parents and caregivers can help them to handle pain in a healthy and adaptive way. Pain is a normal, natural part of life. It's a protective response that signals potential threat. So it's a biologic process with an ecologic context. So environment and state of mind really matter. The nuance of this is that pain is both universal and completely individualized. So no two people experience pain the exact same way, despite everyone experiencing it. Kids and adolescents are no different. They develop and create their pain narrative throughout their life. And this happens through personal experience, observation, and societal norms. So how does this really develop? How do we know what pain is, how we experience it? There's really three main components: directive, discriminative, and cognitive. So they each develop at different stages and happen throughout life. The directive develops in utero. So this is sent to the brain via slow fiber transmission, and it's a very diffuse feeling. So even if infants could point and talk right when they come out, they wouldn't be able to say, I have pain on my elbow. It's a more diffuse and general feeling. The discriminative and more localized sensation occurs in the first year of life. That signal is sent from the periphery via myelinated fibers, which are insulated. They get sent fast, and it's a more point-specific part. So a toddler, even as young as 1, could say, "My knee hurts here," and point to it. The cognitive part of this develops over our entire life. That's our understanding of pain. That's our pain narrative and the story. This, as we've mentioned many times before, is influenced by family, culture, education, and previous painful experiences. So up here, we experience pain differently in the Vail Valley than, let's say, someone in Louisiana or someone in Japan. This is based on different age groups, they're going to experience pain differently. We have come a long way in our understanding of how infants experience pain. It actually used to be believed that infants couldn't experience pain because they can't encode memories. And this caused some providers to not give infants postoperative pain medication. Luckily, we now understand that infants do experience distress, and they're actually pre-wired to signal this to us. So it's a protective mechanism, and it encourages bonding with the caregiver. Toddlers, as mentioned, are now able to localize pain. And the cool thing about that is not only can they say what hurts, but also start to verbalize how it's going to make them feel better. So they start to develop that understanding of, I don't want to experience that pain, and this is how I can make it better or avoid it. Once kids get into the school age group, they are starting to develop their pain narratives to a much greater degree. They're starting to have a framework that allows them to verbalize how a current event that they're experiencing compares to a past event. So this headache doesn't hurt as bad as it did when I fell skiing last year, or this is the worst stomach ache I have ever felt. And sometimes that can come across as very dramatic, but to them, it could be the most painful stomach ache they've ever had. So it is important not to minimize it or over dramatize. We're trying to just remain neutral, ask questions, and tell them to help us understand what they're experiencing. At this age, kids really rely heavily on their caregivers and peers to help them frame their response. And this is called vicarious emotional conditioning. So it's a little bit more advanced part of what Brittney mentioned when the toddler or baby looks to their parents to understand if they should cry or not. This is the modeling that Harlan mentioned, where it's so important to do as I do and start to model a positive engagement with pain instead of, oh, my back hurts, I'm gonna sit on the couch and eat ice cream for 4 days. In adolescence, the males and females start to have different responses to pain around puberty. So our societal responses change, males and females start to be treated a little bit differently, and that differs how our pain response develops. Abstract thinking continues to evolve, and we're able to start understanding the causes of pain and also how to help manage it. So that cognitive reframing, perspective shifting is much more able to be done at this age because we have that cognitive awareness. So this is also a very important time to help model and develop these active coping strategies so that you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of success. At this age, adolescents also start to understand that they are in an acute pain state and this isn't going to last forever, and there are strategies they can use to change it. So it really comes back to this overlap of all of these different things that occur to come and center around the pain. So a little bit more about this through a case example. This is Sally and Susie. They are both 9 and they're on the swings after school. They're both swinging really high and they see their parents pull up. So they jump off and both of them land and break their wrist. Bummer. So they get up, they're in pain. Sally starts running to her mom, and her mom is in her Subaru and sees her coming. She fortunately attended Eat Chat Parent last week and knows that how she responds to Sally is going to really influence her experience. So Sally's mom gets out of the car, Sally runs to her and she gives her a hug and says, "Tell me what's going on. What happened? How are you feeling?" She notices that Sally's wrist is pretty skewed and that she will definitely need to go to the emergency department. So they get in the car, and on the way, Sally's mom starts preparing her for what's going to happen. That we're going to the ER, it's going to be busy, there's a lot of beeping, there's noise, there might be some people there, doctors and nurses who need to touch your wrist. It may not feel very good, but they're helping you. And they start to talk about ways to distract Sally if she needs it. So they have a song that she can listen to. They're going to talk about a family vacation coming up, some distraction techniques. So Sally gets her arm wrapped up in the cast. They head home. And the next day she has gymnastics. And she doesn't want to go to gymnastics because she can't go on the bars. But Sally's mom reminds her that she can go and do the low balance beam and she can support her friends and watch. And Sally goes to gymnastics, she moves around, they go on their family walks. All in all, 4 weeks, Sally gets her cast off, she gradually returns to gymnastics. Things are pretty good. Susie, on the other hand, poor Susie, her mom was stuck in the Edwards Roundabout and missed Eat Chat Parent. So she has no idea how to handle this situation. She jumps out of the car, runs to Susie and is freaking out. "Oh my gosh, it looks so bad. This is terrible. Oh, your wrist is definitely broken. This is awful. You must be in so much pain. Get in the car. We have to go right now." So Susie's in a lot of distress. Her wrist hurts. She's uncomfortable. The only thing Susie's mom says on the way is, don't worry, it's okay, it's gonna be okay, stop crying, don't worry." And Susie starts thinking, oh my gosh, there must be something really bad to worry about. This is not good. So she has no idea what to expect when she gets to the emergency department. There are all these people, they're touching her wrist, it hurts, not a good experience. They go home, Susie goes to bed, she doesn't go to gymnastics the next day. Mom thinks it'll be too dangerous. And she hasn't really moved very much when she goes to get her cast off 4 weeks later. When the cast comes off, her nerves haven't gotten much blood flow. The muscles are really tight. It's painful. She never does gymnastics again. So obviously this is a very extreme example that hopefully will not happen, but it does show that on two experiences on paper that seem the exact same can be experienced and the outcomes can be very different. So how we respond really matters. A few takeaways from this. Good things to do. Ask open-ended questions. Try not to put words in kids' mouths. How do you feel? Can you explain it to me? Stay calm and neutral if possible. Explain what's going to happen in language that a child understands. So fear is a huge part of the pain response. It goes back to that emotion and the mental side of things, and making sure that kids have an idea of what is going to happen, if at all possible, can really alleviate a lot of the discomfort that they feel. And this is really true for all of us. Fear heightens that pain response. It sends us into the stress zone, and our alarm bells start going off a lot easier. So the more that we can explain and take down the fear, the better. We want to talk directly to the child. I think in medical settings, it's easy to leave them out and not include them in the discussion, and that's actually detrimental. And then encourage movement. Movement is so, so important. So it improves blood flow, it can promote healing, it releases those endorphins, the dopamine that Harlan was talking about, and it improves our mood because of that. So a few things to avoid. We want kids to be included and doing their normal activities if at all possible. So they may be adapted, like Harlan was saying, maybe the referee, or they're there cheering them on or handing out water, but they're still involved and getting that social interaction with the so important. Try to avoid phrases like "don't worry." It sends those alarm bells. There must be something to worry about. And then try not to ask too often about how it's feeling. That really reinforces those pathways and that negative spiral of, oh, it hurts, oh, it hurts, oh, it hurts. And then it's effect. So let's get into, okay, we have a painful experience. As I said, we're all going to experience that. What can we do to make it a positive one? So these must be a family process. It can't be something that only one person does or is only the do as I say. It really must be a do as I do. And these strategies that we're going to talk about can be part of your emergency plan. So it's helpful to try to practice them or utilize them in less extreme situations so that if something happens that sends you into a really intense pain experience, you have those kind of in your back pocket to use and help get out of this pain roundabout and change the negative thoughts. For infants and toddlers, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you have a question about any of them or a specific scenario you'd like to talk through, we can talk about it in the questions, or you can email too. Infants and toddlers, so any sort of movement, walking, running, dancing, tricycle, strider bike, blowing bubbles is wonderful because it encourages the deep breathing. So one way that we've use that is take a deep breath in, and when you blow out, you're going to blow away the bad feelings. And then the bubbles are kind of symbolic of that. Any sort of sensory stimulation is actually really helpful because it distracts the brain. So swaddling, a weighted blanket, the couch cushion sandwich is you can take a couch cushion and put it on the floor and have your toddler lay on top of it and then put another one on them. They're the sandwich, and you give a little bit of input, and that helps distract the brain from that other experience that they were feeling. Music, pretend play, all really helpful things to help get out of that pain experience. For school age kids, similar but different types of activities. So an obstacle course, a scavenger hunt, those are great because they involve movement and the brain. The kid has to think and go move around. So we're getting a lot of the cognitive and physical side of things. If you're in a doctor's office and you don't have much room to move, you can use distraction techniques like 20 questions or I Spy. You can count. Just focusing on something different is really helpful. They've actually started talking about deep breathing and meditation in kids as young as kindergarten and even below. So deep breathing and progressive relaxation, you can pretend to be an ice cube or a snowman and melt into the floor. And that helps take you out of that heightened alert state. For adolescents, again, movement is really, really key. And you can start getting into more of those higher level cognitive tasks like meditation, cognitive reframing, journaling is helpful, and humor is huge. So laughing is really a good medicine to use. With all of these, we want to get the brain involved. So get the brain active and engaged. And if the body can move as well, that's even better. The best thing to do is ask and have it be a discussion. So your child knows their body the best, and they will know how to help it feel better too, if we give them that chance to tell us. In summary, pain is in the brain. Without a brain, we wouldn't have pain. In order to help the brain get out of that pain cycle, we need to use active coping strategies. And these strategies must be a family process that's modeled by parents and caregivers in a positive way. A few extra resources. If you found this interesting, you want additional reading, and just for that pain, if you are in the pain cycle, these are some things that can help get out of it. Be the Boss of Your Pain is a book that explains it in kid-friendly language. Headspace and Calm are both meditation apps that have free parts to them and have kid-specific meditation. Because shots and vaccines have been a topic of conversation lately, this YouTube video, It Doesn't Have to Hurt, is actually put on by the IWK Health Center in Nova Scotia, and it talks about ways to prepare kids for getting shots in an adaptive and healthy way. And then these podcasts are more information about pain, and the Invisibilia one specifically talks about a extreme experience of pain and how the girl got out of it. It talks a lot about the emotional side of pain that Harlan mentioned, and that pain roundabout that Brittney talked. So these are just a few. There's lots and lots of information out there. So again, please let us know. I'll put our contact info back up, and feel free at any point to email and talk. And we will now open it up to questions, conversation. We'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Thank you so much, Kristin. We had a couple of questions that were sent before tonight's panel discussion, but we have one right now from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, understanding anxiety is a key factor in physical presentation for pain for people of all ages. How would you best navigate a teen that has had multiple tests and procedures done to diagnose a medical issue with no result? How do parents support their child that does not appear to have an eating disorder, though is developing psychosomatic barriers to eating certain foods based on an undiagnosed manifestation?
Well, thanks for the question. My thought would be that I would want to start with focusing on coping skills for the anxiety that's present. Whether we have a diagnosed, undiagnosed, a real or unreal medical issue, the anxiety is real. It's present and it's experienced in this case. And so we have something for sure that's presenting itself, and let's work there and start there. And if we kind of think about the big picture of that personal experience, if we can then just, okay, we're going to definitely focus in this psychological circle, and let's develop a lot of coping skills for anxiety, and not get into whether or not this anxiety is about a real connection to a physical issue, but start with, let's just get the skills in place and practice regularly the skills to deal with this anxiety. And then over time, as we build that foundation, we might be able to get up to higher level discussions about some of the greater medical issues or possible medical issues that are at play here. But we need that foundational level of, how do I self-soothe? What can I do to care for my body? How can I calm myself physiologically down? And there's lots of interventions that I could introduce, like biofeedback would be one, to learn how to use controlled breathing to get a better heart rate variability, create a relaxation response in the body. Kristin mentioned doing progressive muscle relaxation. That's another good way. So there are some kind of physical based relaxation techniques that we could do, but I would want to have that person connected through therapy to be able to develop and work on this foundational anxiety treatment. And then I think we would get to the other stuff down the road, but whether or not that's kind of true is not where I would want to focus. I want to focus on there's suffering here. Let's get skills and things to help feel better, and then we'll go from there.
I agree. That was great, Harlan. I agree that addressing the anxiety piece, but something that stuck out to me that you said, in the question was saying they've had multiple medical tests saying there's nothing wrong with them. And I think we need to acknowledge that and say to the kid or the person that it might be, hey, this is great, right? We've been through these things. We know it's not these serious things that are causing this. We've tested these things. That's good. that doesn't mean that I don't believe you, that you're not feeling good, that you don't hurt. So we're not devaluing their pain experience or what they're going through. They're feeling something. We just know these aren't the causes of it. It might be more that anxiety piece. That's the cause of it. And then we're going to focus on helping that. So we're not denying that, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. Why don't you feel good? It's, hey, these things aren't wrong. That's a really good thing, but I still understand that you hurt. And we're gonna work on the things that we need to get you to hurt less.
Yeah, I think just a couple things that where my brain went that Brittney just mentioned focuses on that cognitive reframing of, so you've had all these negative tests, that's a great thing. Let's focus on that positive aspect, but also that we believe you. And I think hearing that is really critical, that pain is real and what you're experiencing is real, even if the MRI doesn't show a blown ACL. And in our culture and the medical field, we want a defined explanation. I tore my ACL is much easier for people to understand than I'm just experiencing this and there's not a very defined reason why. But that doesn't mean it's not real, and there are things that we can do to help that.
Great, thanks for those responses. The next question is that this is around siblings. My daughter is 12 and very strong and has a high pain tolerance that she's very proud of, especially when her older brother, now 16, is experiencing pain and not handling it very well. Any tips on how to explain to both of them that it's just not worth arguing or fighting about, that they're just different?
So I think this goes back to, well, one, sibling rivalry, who has the higher pain tolerance. That's hard, but it really isn't worth arguing or fighting about. Keeping things, like we said, pain is a completely individual experience, and we're never going to know if what I'm experiencing is higher, lower, better, worse than what Brittney or Harlan may experience. The trying to keep it open-ended and explaining what they're feeling can be helpful. And this, I think both are ways to, whether it's really high pain tolerance, which I'll put in quotes even, or a more heightened sensitive response, it's how our bodies are reacting, and it's where we're falling on the threshold that Brittney put up. So our alarm system might be a little bit higher at certain times, and it might be a little bit lower at certain times. And some people operate at a different baseline. So that doesn't mean it's better or worse. It's just we're different, and how we experience that is different.
Yeah, and I think the open-ended questions there might be a good learning process for the two of them. Like Kristin said, try to talk to them a little bit more. So on both the sides of it is, hey guys, what else is going on in life right now? Or why do you think you hurt? Or why do you feel it this way? And that might bring up some other things that are going on, where maybe brother says, man, I'm really stressed out. I have all these tests. I'm worried about, these things going on. And maybe the other sibling says, I feel fine right now. Life is good. And that's a great time to kind of discuss, hey, there's some other things. My stress that I'm experiencing right now might be causing me to feel things differently than somebody else, and that's okay. Or that discussion on, hey, when you feel something, what do you do? What makes you feel better? And this one may say, hey, screaming really loud makes me feel better and it calms me down. And this one may say, being sarcastic and telling somebody to get over it makes me feel better. And we say, that's cool, that's okay. But they're different strategies, and that's okay.
I think too, going back to the culture and our societal norms, typically a high pain tolerance or grin and bearing it is seen as a positive attribute and something that we strive for. But in a lot of ways, it doesn't always mean, that's not always a good thing. Addressing these things and helping to make things feel better helps you develop those strategies and have that plan so that you can adapt and get out of this pain cycle. And it's all on a spectrum. So there's not a right or wrong. And I think hopefully through this, starting this discussion, it will help people realize that grin and bear it is not always the best. Pain tolerances are a very subjective thing that we can't quantify, and one is not better than the other.
Great. We're
you having 2 teens in the house next year. So keep strong. That is no easy task for anyone. The only thing I would add to it is, 2 teenagers are not easy to deal with, but positive reinforcement of when you see them interacting in ways that you approve of, that are more supportive, that you reward those, whether it's with verbal rewarding. If you create a token jar, I heard you compliment your brother, but reward that any way you can to try to increase the behavior you want to see in them is a stronger way to change behavior than through trying to punish and say, stop that, don't do that. So that's another angle to try to take.
Okay, next question is, how do you support individuals who are afraid to return to full activity once they've been cleared and their choice not to return is out of fear of being re-injured?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's okay to say, hey, I can understand. We haven't done this in a while, right? So that fear or being concerned about that is valid and something I think anybody would experience. And so we say we're going to take it one step at a time, right? So whatever that activity might be, if it's football, the idea of getting tackled right now probably sounds really scary. So we say we're not going to first day come out and say, let's go sprint and get tackled. We're going to start with things like, hey, putting weight on my leg and walking. And once I can do that, we're going to grade our activities. So, okay, that's good. Right now, maybe I'm going to start running without anybody else near me. And I'm going to do some drills where I'm by myself, where there's no chance of having any contact. Once I'm feeling really good and awesome about that, then I start with things that are a little more context and a little bit of experience with lots of positive outcomes. And then we gradually increase the intensity closer to what that person has to do. So we call that graded exposure to exercise. And we start where they're comfortable. So what are you comfortable with? Okay, I'm not even comfortable putting my leg on the ground. All right, we're gonna start there. Or, hey, I'm comfortable with this, but I'm just not comfortable with contact. We're gonna meet you in the middle and start there. And then we're gonna gradually add to it.
Yeah, one of the things that this is a very great question, because this is one of those things that is often very difficult to define, right? We can use all of these physical measures of somebody's ability to be cleared physically to return to sport, and everything says you're good to go, but the person has that, there's a really fancy word for this, kinesiophobia, fear of re-injury. But the way that a psychological approach to this would involve using some mental imagery. So what we are having inside the mind here is they have a very low self-efficacy or belief in their ability to do this without pain or without injury, right? That's where that fear is. And so through the use of guided imagery, and you can do this slowly, step by step, and you walk somebody through seeing themselves, and you want these images to be very vivid, see, hear, smell, what does it feel like? But we're going to guide them through an imagery protocol to help them build time and time again, them being in first person and also them being in kind of third person, watching themselves be successful in their return to sport. And we would do that over time to help build up that self-efficacy and help kind of battle that fear that is appropriate and normal. It's not abnormal to have fear of re-injury, but the way we try to treat the psychological piece of that is through exposure, and imagery is a nice way to do it. And then you can kind of process afterwards, develop coping skills to deal with emotions that did come up, go back through and have successful imagery experiences until we get that person ready to kind of step on the slopes, field, court, whatever their return to is.
Kristin, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, this is why we're really excited to have Harlan as part of our team, because that is really a lot of his wheelhouse. And we definitely cover that in PT, but it's great to have the extra support. That's all.
Okay, another great resource over there at Howard Head with Harlan. Okay, this question I've been hearing a lot from not necessarily my children, but my friends' children. And it goes, my daughter has stomach aches that are debilitating. We are talking to Children's Hospital, etc. Also a bit of PTSD type fear regarding the fear of stomach aches. I've been hearing this a lot with children, especially during this time of just a lot of what we're experiencing manifesting with a mind-gut connection. So whoever would like to jump in.
Yeah, I think stomach aches are one of the most commonly experienced type of pain and discomfort in kids and adolescents. So it's a really common thing that's hard. It can be very vague and hard to define. So I think it goes back to wanting that very specific explanation of why, and that can be hard to accept and deal with, that there may not be a why. It may be because there are so many different factors that can play in. So it can be stress, like you mentioned, Amy. It has been a very stressful year with lots and lots of changes. So we sort of sound like broken records, but really going back to that open-ended discussion of what else might be going on. When does this happen? Let's find things when it feels better, and let's do more of those. So really focusing on the positive type of what's helping and what's feeling good. And then going through talking about what they think helps, and going through that positive feedback loop to try to get out of those negative fears.
Yeah, I think that's great in saying, and I really liked saying, hey, what we might focus on is we might not fully be able to understand all the reasons why all the time, and that can be frustrating, I think, for any experience. But we know, I go back to kind of my mood example, that sometimes we might not know, like we might be in a bad mood and we might not necessarily be able to put a finger necessarily on why, or, I'm just grumpy today and I might not fully understand why. And so what would I do? Well, I might want to further try to understand why I'm grumpy, but if I can't get there, that's probably just going to breed more anxiousness and more frustration. So at some point I say, I don't really know why I'm grumpy, but what I'm going to focus on is what makes me not grumpy. And I'm going to start my checklist right there. And so same thing with my stomach ache. If we've come up with things that we know tend to be soothing to the stomach ache, we're going to get the frustration off. Okay, I might not understand why I've got the stomach ache right now at this moment. I'm just going to immediately start my checklist of things that I know start to make my stomach ache feel better. And then we can move forward from there.
Yeah, and I think similar to what you're saying, Brittney, having a list of things to do, you can kind of create, depending on the age of this child, but something that we would call kind of like the trauma first aid kit. You said there's kind of PTSD type fear regarding that. And so you create a kit that in it has tactile things, some olfactory things, taste, smells, activities, that checklist that Brittney's talking about, that we have this kit that we get that's kind of my self-soothing emergency kit that we'll get out, and then we'll try to get active in focusing on how we can cope with this.
Okay, so we have another question, and it's in regards, I think, to the sandwich place where we all are. And sorry, we have a little bit of an echo going here. Okay, I think we got it. So as our parents get older and are now grandparents, how do we encourage them in a healthy way to stay active? We as a family always like to go for small walks, do stretches with them, swim, but one of them blames his lack of movement and mobility on a chronic issue and keeps getting various surgeries and going through PT after, but not making movement a part of his lifestyle. It causes frustration in our family due to that person wanting empathy and even sympathy for him, but not doing the things necessary to be healthier. Any words of wisdom there?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it's frustrating on probably both parts of things. But one thing I like to say is if people have this chronic condition or thoughts about why they hurt, is sometimes our ideas or the family's ideas of why that person hurts and their ideas might be very different. So the first kind of question is, getting an understanding of why, what about that chronic condition do you think is limiting your ability to move? And that starts to open up a discussion. Some of it may be, well, I have this picture, right? I was told I had this image of me that defines me now. And with imaging, I like to say, hey, it can be a great thing, but I very much like to say, hey, an image, right, or a picture can be a picture of yourself that maybe you've seen and you say, man, that picture really just isn't the best representation of me. I don't feel like it really looks like me, or I don't like it. And so that picture or that image or that MRI might be, we kind of remind saying that was a picture, a picture of you at one moment in time. It might not say necessarily anything about how you function when you move. And so I think just, getting back to that and saying, getting an understanding of, what it is that they feel kind of those barriers are to movement, or maybe it's, I can go for the walk, but you guys walk too fast. And that puts me out of commission, and being able to function for the next 3 days and do anything I want. And so that exposure might need to be more graded in saying, okay, I understand that. We can slow down a little bit, or maybe we need to start at a smaller pace walk, or maybe you guys love walking, but he's really just not that jazzed up, about walking. So kind of picking an activity that says, what are you really excited about? What really, what do you really want to do? And we start with little bits of exposure on something that they're really, really excited about. Because if you're not motivated or don't really love something and you hurt, that's really hard to get out there and want to do that. And so we want to make sure that we're doing something that is important to us. We understand how, and then, hey, positive encouragement into getting out instead of just harping on somebody and saying, well, if you don't do this, you're just going to get worse. And kind of like Harlan said too, kind of rewarding that positive side of things that you see. If you see them doing some motivation to do some good, or they are getting out or doing things a little bit more, we really encourage that instead of just harping on the, well, you didn't do this today.
And I know the question is actually like, how do you encourage them? And it's always hard to try to change somebody else's behavior. It's a difficult thing to do, especially when it's your parent. That role reversal is not easy in any family system. Certainly there's a pull to keep things the way it are. I'm the parent, you're the kid, you stay the kid. And it's difficult to change those patterns. Certainly it happens in life and the times. But if I were to kind of twist the question a little bit, let's say I was working with this individual with the older parent, I would do something called a values activity sort, where I would have them identify what are the things that are their strong values in life, and try to identify what are those things they really care about. And then after we identify those core values, the things that are really important to this person, then we would hunt for behaviors that are congruent with those values. And so if playing with the grandkids is a value, or connection to family, or love to family, or something like that's a value, we might identify behaviors that match that value and highlight the fact that if the value is connection and they stay back and they don't do things, that they're behaving in a way it's incongruent, and that's going to create dysphoria. It's going to create suffering. And the more that we behave congruent with our values, usually the better that we're going to feel. And so that's how I would approach it individually. Now, as a child, it's kind of hard to present that to your parent and say, hey, I want you to do this, but you could talk about it and just say what's important to you. What are the things that you really care about? And how can we get more of that in your life? And then when we do more things that are important in somebody's life, we'll build positive momentum of them going towards a life worth living. And that's really important, is going towards something somebody really cares about.
That's fantastic. So I'm just going to ask one more question before we start to wrap things up. And that is in regards to the grin and bear it culture. Is it okay to ignore pain?
The psychology answer is it depends.
Yeah, and I think similarly that we think about, it's not, necessarily that we ignore it. We're going to acknowledge how we feel about it, but we're going to take that into consideration. And that might go back into that pacing, right, of activity, is hey, I'm not just ignoring this. If I'm doing something and like, I see it all the time when patients are coming in and we're trying to work on a stretch and their face is like grimacing and their eyes are popping. And I'm like, why are you doing that? You know, like we don't have to go that far. We don't have to stretch that much. I want you to tease, touch, you know, experience what you feel. We're going to nudge it and then we're going to back off. We're going to nudge and then we're going to back off. We're not just blowing past something that feels really, really uncomfortable. And that's kind of sometimes that different culture of sometimes we're active individuals. We just, hey, if I just get through this and just, you know, go for it, that I'm going to, you know, just be fine. But sometimes it's like, man, I might do this, and all of a sudden then it's like, man, it doesn't make me feel very good, and I can't do nor other things that are important in my life for multiple days on end after that. And I'm like, well, is that really worth it? Is that where our values lie? No. So what if we scale back a little bit? And then, hey, for the next couple of days, we're still able to participate in all the other good things that we like in life. That's a better way to kind of progress and gradually move from there. I kind of think of it similar to like if you've ever had a massage, right? And some people really like that deep tissue massage where you're getting in there. But say they hit a spot that's just super sensitive when they get in there, and you're like grimacing, embarrassing, and bearing away from them. Your muscles are really tense. Like, oh my gosh, that's just so intense. In that moment with that tissue and at that state, it might say, man, if they went in and did that like really nice relaxing pressure, that might be what's needed right then and there. So same thing with our activity. If I'm stretching or moving to a capacity that I'm grimacing and bearing no, I'm not just going to ignore that. I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to scale it back a little bit in order to move forward.
Harlan, there's a request to elaborate a little bit more on it depends.
Brittney did. It's the same thing, is that like the reason why I say it depends is it all depends on what is the bigger picture, what's happening here, right? So to deal with pain and grin and bear it in certain situations makes sense if it allows you to engage in a behavior that's congruent with what you want to do in life, so long as it doesn't put you on the couch for 3 days and you can't do anything afterwards. Or maybe in some cases it's worth it, right? Let's just say the example is to dance with my daughter at her wedding, and I'm going to be in bed for 3 days afterwards. I'm doing it. You know what I mean? So it's all about your personal value judgment. And that's why I say it depends. So sometimes it is, but it's not always the answer. It's not, you don't always push through, because then we can create bigger and longer term problems.
Thank you. Fantastic presentation, fascinating topic. And we will have these slides available to you and the YouTube recording. So if there's anyone in your life that you feel like could really use this information, we've had a lot of participants that have viewed after the fact, you know, maybe listening while they're grocery shopping or cooking dinner. So please share in all of your channels and avenues, and do follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We're constantly sharing important content about what's happening with our youth and the ways that we can support youth in our community. And we're grateful, Harlan, Brittney, and Kristin, for all that you do and all that you shared with us this evening. So please reach out to them. Their information is up on the slide. And otherwise, please just keep taking good care of each other. And we'll see you next fall in September for the next Eat Chat Parent. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.